Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon. If you enjoy the videos here, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the Word Balloon YouTube channel, and of course, if you enjoy the audios and the videos, you can subscribe to my Patreon page, patreon.com/wordballoon. Hi everybody, welcome to a Harley Quinn episode recap. We're doing season 1, and I'm very happy to have along with me Patrick Schumacker, the co-showrunner and co-executive producer of Harley Quinn. Good to see you, Patrick.
Good to see you too, John.
Congratulations, man. It's a great first season, and we're starting with episode 1 till Death Do Us Part. And it's funny because synonymous with the very long title for the Birds of Prey movie, this really does begin the emancipation of Harley Quinn.
Yeah, it does. It's funny that you brought up the Birds of Prey thing because we were definitely not in the know about what they were doing at all. We had a really early days meeting with Jeff Johns and Margot Robbie about it, because at one point, Margot was sort of in charge of everything Harley and the character, it seemed. And so we kind of were running things by her, and we pitched our take on the show. And I remember her turning to Jeff and she's like, well, this is kind of a similar setup to what we're doing. And he just goes, trust me, it's not anything like what we're doing with the movie. And so I think while it certainly had the same kind of starting point, or the same idea of that emancipation from the Joker, I think now that the show has been out, now that the movie's been out, you can see that we ended up kind of, serendipitously taking two different paths. I think somebody certainly would have, come to us and said, features would have gotten word that we were maybe crossing into their territory or vice versa. And somebody would have said something, but that was beyond our pay grade. We never saw the script. First time I saw Birds of Prey was in the theater as a paying customer. So, but the starting point was certainly there. I mean, I think that's something that the character in recent years is really, DC's been trying to, make her own thing for a long time, and have succeeded doing so. And so, this was just an opportunity to tell a kind of another one of those stories, but from the perspective of, new writers, TV writers, a lot of writers on staff who had not really been that well versed in, DC Comics lore and mythology and all of that. So we had a nice mix there, and I think we ended up bringing a lot of new things to it. So it was a nice mix of comic nerds and just comedy nerds.
Well, it's a great blend because I think DC fans, and they can see right away from the first episode that there are a lot of nods to the comic books. And I know, too, in previous conversations, you've told me Amanda Conner was involved with character design, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, like really early days, like back in the days of just pitching the show to the studio. This was back when it was 2016, and Justin and I were running Powerless, and no, actually we weren't even running it yet. We were consulting producers on it, and I remember, just sitting in our office at lunch, having a phone call with Amanda, just talking about, what are some of the sort of either episodes that we wanted to kind of bring to life in one, postcard image. And she ended up doing about 5 pieces for us for the studio, and for and to incorporate into the pitch that we ended up pitching to Peter Roth, who's the head of Warner Brothers Television. And I mean, they were beautiful. Some of those images are online. I know there's one image of Harley in Noonan's bar, kind of atop the bar. This is from what became the second episode. No, sorry, this was the third episode. What became her, kind of trying to wrangle a bunch of crew members, and then Kite Man interrupts and fumbles through his own sort of pitch for a heist. And do you guys want to join me? I was thinking about doing like a heist or something. I don't know. And then like everybody's like, hell yeah, and follows him out of the bar, leaving Harley, who actually kind of had a plan out in the cold. So, but anyways, so that was an episode that we knew we wanted to do, like from the days of the pitch, a full 3 years or so before we got our finished animation back for that episode. So, but but Amanda's drawings, and they were full color illustrations that she did along with her usual collaborators. Yeah, they were so helpful in the pitch and bringing it to life. And then Shane Glines, our lead character designer, kind of drew over what Amanda did to make them more. I think the way that Shane has put it was that because the producers, we wanted to focus so much on the comedic performances and making those fluid and nuanced and all of that, he had to kind of change up Amanda's style a little bit because it just doesn't. It's her stuff is deceptively complex, and it doesn't translate to animation necessarily, or else you're going to be spending a small fortune on doing that. It would require like the budget of a Disney feature every episode to be able to do that. So that was untenable. But I think what Shane ended up doing with Amanda's drawings, really making it his own, was amazing and worked so well for the show.
100%, man. No, the designs are great. And that theme, as you mentioned, and we'll get, eventually in subsequent Word Balloon videos, we'll get to episode 3.
Yeah.
But that whole theme of Harley looking for respect is really kind of the through line of the show. And really we see it right away in that first scene where you've got all the white millionaires on the yacht with the pile of money, and she shows up and they're like, oh shit, the Joker's coming, and it's like, no, it's just Harley. Oh well, Jesus, who cares? And they start laughing at her and stuff. So she's like the Rodney of the DC universe.
Yeah, I mean, when we premiered that episode at Comic-Con, the premiere episode, the pilot episode that we're talking about now, at Comic-Con last year, and Justin and I were kind of in the wings of the sort of makeshift stage that they had set up in the ballroom over at the Hilton.
The Hilton.
What's the blue? It's the one where they do the Eisner. That one.
Yeah. That is the Hilton. Absolutely, man. Yeah.
And so we're there. It's like 2,600 people. They've been sitting through panel after panel. I think it was like a Winona Earp panel before us or something.
Okay.
And then they did the whole DC Universe panel, and we were like third up or something, like after like Titans and Doom Patrol. We were kind of the new thing, and we've got some like dramatic stuff happening like before, just with regard to the context of those shows, Titans and Doom Patrol. I know the Titans had suffered this tragedy on behind the scenes with a stuntman.
Oh wow!
And so I remember like the mood was, somewhat sober. And then, Doom Patrol came on and did their thing. And, they sort of bridged the gap between, the drama and the comedy. That show kind of straddles that line. And then we were up, but we were still thinking like, oh, like I have no idea how people are going to react. None. And then we get to that joke you just mentioned with the billionaires sitting on the yacht, and Alan Tudyk voicing the guy who looks like Thurston Howell III, and he's like, gentlemen, fellow whites, raising his glass, and like the audience erupted. You couldn't even hear the rest of what he was saying over the laughter. And then Justin and I looked at each other and were like, it's just this huge sigh of relief. Like, I think people are going to get this. And they did. And of course, like Comic-Con is always a very friendly crowd, I find, at least, when they get to see something new. And so anyways, the reaction was really, resoundingly positive. And, I like my friends were in the audience. They were just like, I've never seen you look so happy walking out to do the Q&A afterwards. But it was such a sigh of relief.
No, I understand, man. A lot of these shows may not land, and it's you got to, and really, like you said, it's the mood of the audience that will dictate how the jokes land. So that's great. Let's talk about some of the casting and stuff. I mean, starting off with Kaylee, and was there ever a thought, because as you say, Margot was kind of involved with overseeing what was going on, at least initially. Was there ever thought of Margot possibly doing it, having time to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of the conversation early on. It was part of the conversation early on, just because Suicide Squad it was already out there. It was in the zeitgeist. She was kind of the face at that point of the character in newer media. So So yeah, that was part of the conversation. I think, schedule and stuff like that just like got in the way. And so, once that happened, we were ready to move on and do something different. And it did create this opportunity to do something very different with the character. So enter, Kaylee, and, we have a relationship with Warner Brothers. Justin and I have been under contract with the studio for the last 5 years or so. And then, of course, Kaylee being on Big Bang Theory for the last 12 years, she's also she's been under contract with the studio for a long time and has a production company called Yes Norman, who produces Harley, among other shows now for Warner's. And our offices are literally like in the same little like 2-story motel looking building on the lot. And Warner Brothers was like, hey, what do you guys think about Kaylee? And we hadn't thought about it initially, but we sat down and met with her, and she was so enthusiastic about the character and had read the pilot, and we sat for 2 hours, and she just had to do it. And at that point we were like, yes, let's try this out. Because for one thing, Kaylee's just like the most positive, enthusiastic collaborator you could ever ask for. And just her excitement about something is so infectious. And she clearly understood the character and clearly understood like the legacy of the character. The one thing that she wanted to do, it was different, was that I was very suspect about at first, was that she didn't want to do the accent. And I was like, just sweating because of thinking of, the fan reaction, thinking of how I felt about that as, someone who has been watching this character for the last, I think it was the 25th anniversary of the character when we pitched the show. So, going on the better part of like 30 years being a fan and hearing that accent and having it feel so inseparable, but she wanted to do it. We gave her the benefit of the doubt. And, when we tested the shows in animatic form early days, like no one said anything. Like occasionally you'd get somebody who's just like, I miss it, but also the show's funny and I don't care.
Cool.
And I was just like, wow. I was like, so, I mean, who's to say anyone's objectively right or wrong about anything? I feel like I was objectively wrong in hindsight for doubting it, because I think the spirit of the character is there with or without the accent.
Totally.
And
absolutely.
I think it was just this cathartic thing for Kaylee, the sort of mania of Harley coming out. She's been doing, multicam is like it's a very, from my perspective, I'm not speaking for Kaylee, it feels like and I've worked in that medium before briefly, but it's such a precise, art form. You've got to do the same thing kind of over and over and over again. You're hitting your marks. It's just the bare bones of like live action filmmaking, but also doing it in that sort of theatrical setting with a live audience and stuff. Like it is so much more precise, and it is so much more musical, like hitting those rhythms and things like that. And then you have Harley, and it's just like, you're not hitting any marks. You're, yeah, sure, you have the script, but like it was this, I think, liberating sort of, exercise for her. And I think it was a way of just like getting out all of her frustrations. I keep telling people, like, I don't think Kaylee goes to therapy, but maybe she doesn't have to after doing Harley. So,
down the line, there's some, of course, good Harley Quinn. I always forget her real name. Harleen Quinn.
Quinzel, yeah.
Quinzel, yes, exactly. So there are some great, psychiatric moments coming in the show.
Yeah.
But and then Alan Tudyk, man, as the Joker. I mean, and also obviously doing double duty sometimes and playing other parts.
Oh yeah, double, triple sometimes, and I mean, he's such a chameleon. And it's funny when we originally cast these roles, we had, Clayface and Joker were kind of part of the equation always. I mean, Joker for obvious reasons, but then Clayface, we just loved the sort of irony of the like Juilliard educated. Well, I mean, Alan's a Juilliard educated actor, but Clayface is kind of that vein, and yet he's a terrible actor, and he's an actor with a capital A, but like he can literally change himself into anything, into any person or thing, and yet he's never able to book a gig because he's just bad. He's just bad. And we love the idea of having him as sort of like the the master of disguise in the group when we were kind of putting together our like A team. And so I think we cast Alan as Clayface first, and then he read for the Joker, and we were like, well, yeah, like let's just have him do both, because he was kind of like, we loved what he was doing with it. He's like he's like, having worked with him on Powerless,
yeah,
he does petulant man-child extremely well, and he's he's a very level-headed guy in real life, but he does that so well. He's able to channel that kind of inner child, and yeah, he was kind of doing like a little bit of the Hamill, like gravelly thing. So there was that familiarity, but he was bringing something new to it. And yeah, that was like a no-brainer. We were like, and we love him. We know him. We love him. We've worked with him multiple times. We'd love to work with him again on anything. So, I mean, yeah, he slotted in right away.
I'm not surprised. And again, I'm not surprised he found the right voice for Joker, and we'll talk more about Clayface in episode 3 when we talk about episode 3 too. But it is cool to hear that, yeah, I mean, again, that it was kind of an afterthought and that you had him first for Clayface. Also, now bringing back Diedrich Bader as Batman, and again, a great Batman, brave and bold, straight up YA show, straight up comedy as well, but in a different vein. And then also, two things. Well, let's talk about Diedrich first. And were there other? I mean, was that always a no-brainer that let's bring Diedrich back because he is so great at voiceover and a great Batman?
Yeah, I think that was our casting directors, Ruth and Robert, who brought him up at first. I think they were the first ones, and then it was like, because one of the things was we were like, well, okay, do we go into this with a philosophy at all with casting, and if we did, is that philosophy, let's just across the board get different people, right? And I think that was initially kind of the philosophy. We're like, okay, we're trying to do our own thing. Let's just, everybody's a different person. And then Ruth and Robert brought up Diedrich, and we were like, okay, like, he's great. Like, love Diedrich, loved him in Drew Carey.
Oh yeah.
Loved him in Office Space was such a like influential movie for like both Justin and me. And so, he was definitely, I mean, he read for it. I mean, that's the amazing thing about animation is just like, you get all of these people who aren't necessarily who are like offer only, but because of or at least their agents will tell you they're offer only, even though they'll gladly come in and read for stuff, which we've had happen a lot, where an actor will tell you after the fact, like, yeah, no, I didn't even talk to my agents about this. Like, we'll contact them directly or something. They're like, yeah, I'll come in and read for it. Like, I remember talking to John Cryer about it. He wasn't involved with the show in any way, but he was another guy who had an office like right next to ours at Warner Brothers, and we just sat down and met with him, and we were going to work with him on something. And he was like, obviously he's at the point in his career where he doesn't have to read for anything if he doesn't want to, but he's like, why would you do that? Like you might not be right for it. And let's figure that out right away. And I thought it was really smart. So, but anyways, Diedrich read for this version of Batman, and in the pilot, it's like so like terse, and he's such a wet blanket, and we kind of keep the cuffs on him for quite a while in the series, probably until like the second season, really, that we let him loose. But yeah, at that point, we were just like, okay, we're going to be doing a bunch of, yes, we've heard a lot of Batmans, in these audio recordings. Diedrich sent in a great tape. He's just great in general. We know that we're going to eventually be relying on some improvisation. We know that Diedrich is a foolproof choice in that context, right? He's just a brilliant improviser. Let's bring him in. And so we kind of broke our, very loose rule of, let's go with all different casts or voices for everybody. So Yeah, we were just fans. The short version is we were just fans, and it felt like we'd be passing up an amazing opportunity. So,
Well,
and
he's the straight man. He's this, and it's interesting because other characters that normally are straight men are played to comedic effect, and that's my next point, where we have a rooftop scene with Batman and James Gordon, of course, and Harley, and your Commissioner Gordon is, it seems, one panic attack away from a full nervous breakdown. I mean, he is really on the edge, and I think it's great. Who plays him?
So Chris Maloney, who I think a lot of people know from several decades on Law and Order SVU.
Yep.
Elliot Stabler, and now they're reviving that character for, I don't know if it's a limited series or not. Dick Wolf is reviving that character for NBC.
Yeah.
And we had worked with Chris. This was one where we were like, we wrote the part for Chris.
Really?
Like, yeah. Because we had a show with Chris on. It was one season, short-lived, on Fox in 2014 called Surviving Jack. That was sort of like a Wonder Years for the 90s, set in 1991. It was based on Justin, my writing partner, producing partner's relationship with his dad, which we had turned into a television show prior to that, even with William Shatner and Shit My Dad Says.
Of course.
But this was like the single cam, sort of more cinematic, kind of wistfully nostalgic look at 1991. And Chris was the dad, and he was this sort of he was a cancer doctor with this very war vet who was very had this hard earned kind of outlook on life, and he was just very very tough on his kid. And Maloney does that so well, and it was such a pleasure working with Chris, and he's just so good, and we knew he's funny well before casting him in that, because he had done Wet Hot American Summer. He had done They Came Together, all these these movies and series with the guys who did a lot of the people who were involved with like The State on MTV, Michael
Absolutely.
Showalter,
Yeah.
David Wayne, Michael Ian Black. And those guys are so brilliant, and for them to have seen something in Chris was so brilliant. And he plays an unhinged character in the Wet Hot movies and in series that followed. And yeah, we were just like, well, yeah, like unhinged war vet type is Chris, and he's so like giddy in the booth, getting to, again, I think it's like I was talking about with Kaylee before, where you're just kind of able to get out like your demons in the booth in ways. It's like, I don't know if it's like a safe space where, because you don't have cameras going, it's just audio. I don't know, where you're just able to like really let loose. And Chris, I think it was like a little bit of literally like a technical learning curve with Chris, because he would get into it and he would start like moving around and stuff, and then everybody's just up, Dad, we gotta come back, just plant yourself.
Yeah, stay in front of the mic, man. That's what I'm doing right now, obviously.
Yeah, when we were recording the pilot, that was the one time in the entire life of the series that we had multiple actors in the booth at the same time. And there was one time, and it was for the opening scene on the boat on the yacht with the billionaires, that we needed like a bunch of male voices, and it was Alan as the Joker and this sort of Captain stooping looking Thurston Howell III looking billionaire guy. And then we had Jim Rash and Diedrich and Maloney all doing just like, second voices together. And I remember at one point, like Maloney kept like, he's like acting, and he's talking to like Diedrich's character, but like he's literally like turning to like address him, and Diedrich's just like, no, you can't do that. He's just in it, but eventually he got it pretty quickly. But he's still like, he would say to me like during records, like he's like cracking up at the dialogue, or he's just cracking himself up. And Maloney's like also like an amazing improv guy. Like he's just he'll just crack himself up, and he'll be like, this show is just so giddy. It's so giddy.
Totally. Do you think is that a natural thing with animation, that the voice actors do kind of play big to match the visuals, or because I mean it's comedy, and comedy sometimes plays very big, but also sometimes you get a nice subtle comedy as well, like a Barney Miller or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, what do you? I mean, yeah, is it that's what the tone needed to be for the show?
It depends on the characters, I think, right? Like I think obviously with Chris and with Commissioner Gordon, we definitely, he kind of runs the gamut for me, because then he'll hit his like low lows and you'll get some like really subtle little laugh lines here and there when he's just kind of muttering to himself. And, Harley's pretty big and over the top, but then you have like Ivy and Lake brings this very just sort of dry, kind of like Daria like delivery to everything. And she's someone who, we love it when she'll just, she takes the script, she's got the script, she'll do a take, and then she'll just do another take where, she's like changed some words around that, I don't know if it just like inherently like suits her brain more or whatever. And we're not like married to the words at all in these scripts, and there's so much improv in them.
Cool.
But yeah, Lake is somebody who just like, I mean, she just is naturally gifted and has a long history with doing voice work. She's written and directed a movie and starred in a movie about, it's called In a World, and it's about like, trailer and voiceover and voiceover people, and it's like a father-daughter story. It's a really great movie.
Big
worth
fan.
checking out. But she's so knowledgeable about this sort of thing in particular. But yeah, that's a character that we wanted to be much drier, much more, much subtler. And like as the series progressed and you want to evolve the characters, like she starts to get a little bit over the top in certain areas, and you pick and choose your times to do that. But I don't know. It's hard to speak to that, what you mentioned before, in terms of animation in general, because I have such a limited experience with animation. I only know our show. Like this is, we've only worked in live action. I can absolutely see that, particularly with like, younger skewing audiences, having, watches. I have a daughter. I watch those all the time, and
everyone's big. Yeah,
everyone's big, and I get that. And, you want to. It's sort of like simplifying, emotions and things like that.
Getting them to focus and pay attention. No, I get that. Yeah. And you're right. And also, I mean, one of my favorite lines at the end of the first episode that Lake does, where she does get big, is she's like, "You don't want to join the Legion of Doom. They're such dicks." And I mean, she says dicks. So, and that reminds me too, and I want to talk about leading up to when Ivy shows up, Harley and Arkham, but also the tone of the show, the F-bombs, and really the level of violence, frankly, as well. Yeah. Was there ever a thought from the people upstairs about not making it so R-rated and making it more of a PG-13 or even more accessible to a younger audience?
I think the answer is no, in general. I mean, when they came to us, they being the studio, and particularly Susan Rovner, an executive over at Warner Brothers Television, who's now one of the co-presidents of the studio, when she came to us in 2016, she said the words R-rated.
Excellent.
When they were like, "What do you guys think about trying to pitch on this?" And so it was always going to be there. I think there was, the tonnage of violence and F-bombs and language and whatnot. We definitely, in the early stages, got notes on that, just in terms of, hey, maybe lighten it up a little bit. I mean, I think I've said before, when we premiered the show at Comic-Con, I remember talking about that we did get like a fuck count. We got an F-bomb count put onto the episodes. I think it was like after episode 2, where we had, I think it was like 21 F-bombs in a 22-minute show. So you're talking about like, an F-bomb a minute. And they were like, okay, this is just too much. And then it's like, how do you quantify that? And they were like, I don't know, 8. And Harley
they get a number.
I think it was kind of arbitrary, but it was, and it wasn't a rule. It was kind of a guideline, and we stuck to it for the most part. But with the pilot, we wanted that first scene. It looks like overkill. It might be overkill, but we wanted that first scene to really make a statement that like, this is not for children.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of cursing and a lot of really like some of our goriest stuff in the series is in that first scene with, just like close-ups of like Harley's mallet, like shattering somebody's kneecap. And you've got those sort of color cards and like, it's almost like an anime style, real deep, deep focus on like this one super painful looking trauma to a kneecap, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was just by design, like sort of front loaded so that people understood, okay, this is not going to be like anything that we've seen before. But really, it was like the language stuff. And when we talk about episode 3. We could talk a little bit about the one time that we were told no, that still haunts me. But
we'll talk about it. Absolutely. I know exactly what you're talking about, and absolutely we'll get there, man. You're killing me. That's fantastic. And seriously, thank God. And I was talking about this with Alan Burnett recently as well about the full-length DC animated movies. And it's like, God, it's really great that the execs get it, that there is this adult audience out there that wants this stuff, along with the kid stuff. And God bless making the kid stuff, but let's let animation evolve. And certainly with other shows like Rick and Morty and The Simpsons and Futurama and all these other shows and stuff, it's great to see that other producers are getting that opportunity to tell adult animated stories. So
absolutely. I mean, and also like Archer, Rick and Morty and Venture Brothers especially.
Certainly,
those were such touchstones for us when kind of trying to briefly articulate the tone of our show, whether it's to executives or actors, things like that. Because I mean, one of the things too was talking about not having people in the booth together. We love how shows like Rick and Morty have that natural kind of overlapping dialogue, that feels, it just feels that sort of lack of precision makes it feel that much funnier and that much more grounded to us. And so,
yeah,
even though we don't have our cast in the same room most of the time, the way that it's cut together or the way that we, direct actors in the booth or, read scenes along with them in the booth, like it's designed to have that kind of natural quality as much as possible, which feels adult to me, I guess. Like having like the veneer kind of like filed off of it, if that makes sense, and making it seem a little rougher weirdly makes it. I guess it's the grounding of it for me that makes it seem more adult. I don't know. That's what I tell myself.
Well, Ivy makes her entrance while Harley's in Arkham, and that whole atmosphere of your guys' Arkham is great. Tons of Easter eggs. I love Calendar Man being in there. I think that's fantastic. And Killer Croc. And I mean, that's just panning through the prisoner visitor kind of classic scene that you always see in these jails and stuff.
Yeah.
And just seeing all those rogues and stuff in there. That was fantastic. And, I know it was great. And of course, Harley's delusion of, oh yeah, Mr. J will save me the next day and stuff. And, and that great scene too of as he's leaving and like, yeah, I'll save you tonight. Well, actually I got something tonight, maybe tomorrow. And it's kind of that classic boyfriend kind of, listen, I'm going to go for a pack of cigarettes. I'll see you in a minute. And 3 weeks later, that kind of thing. And in your guys' case, a year later for Harley sitting around.
Yeah. When Joker got in that sub, there was like a whole 2-minute long run of him just like hemming and hawing about whether he was gonna. We were like, we got to cut this. There's no way that Harley is fighting Batman for this long.
Those fight scenes, and true. I mean, honestly, it's great to see her be so athletic. I mean, that's the cool thing is you definitely satisfy the comic book action fan that is like, all right, and you do get a couple. There's always at least a couple big scenes. Big fighting scenes and stuff like that. So I think that's really cool as well. Got to talk about Ivy's plant, Frank, and JB Smoove, right? As Frank.
Yeah. I mean, Frank was, when we were pitching the show, it was like, there were a couple of times where we were like, well, let's make up this character, let's make up that character. And then I think DC rightfully was like, well, chances are if you have sort of like an archetype for a character, we have a character for that, like that is already created and that, you should probably consider bringing in, given our roster of thousands of characters.
Totally.
They were right. And so Frank Frank became the only anomaly. Frank was the only, at least for the first season, with the exception of like our take of Harley's parents, maybe. Like he was the only kind of fully original character. I feel like he was like a Dean Lorey creation. Dean, one of our other showrunners. It's hard to remember back this far, but
yeah, I understand, man.
But yeah, I mean, he was obviously like aesthetically, clearly, sort of an homage to Audrey from Little Shop of Horrors. And,
sure.
You know, and I mean, it started as just like, well, we need like a man-eating plant to be Ivy's friend, who is sort of, you know, has been, you know, living in the city for a while and would have like the sensibilities of like, I don't know, JB Smoove or something. Do you think we can get him? And then he was like, and then he just like came in and was like, yeah, I'll do it.
Outstanding.
And Frank just became this kind of like our like, I'm borrowing a term from Bill Lawrence, who created Scrubs and Spin City, the joke assassin, who's just like the character who comes in and just like, you know, throws out like a quip that, you know, just kind of brings the house down. And, you know, JB is that kind of guy. And Frank became that kind of guy. And yeah, we felt like we needed like another sort of foil for Ivy in a different kind of way. You know, someone who would draw out her, you know, she's somebody who's in denial of like so many things that the series hasn't even explored yet. And we're into the second season on DC Universe, at least. Mm-hmm. And, you know, she's so buttoned up and so, you know, just in her like emotional shell and all those metaphors. And Frank is somebody who will just say, that's bullshit. You know, that's bullshit. Like you need me, you know, like when Ivy's just talking about how she doesn't, you know, she's fine as like a solo act, and Frank's like pouring her coffee for her and just like waiting on her hand and foot, and he'll just, yeah, he's just like the truth teller, and yeah, so that was a character that, like, you know, he didn't have a lot of plot weight, you know, in the pilot for sure, and like moving forward, he didn't have a lot of plot weight, but it was just like more Frank. Because he just brings like a smile to everybody's face, and you know, he comes in and out of the show as needed.
Well, yeah, and again, like a great foil and kind of punch in the veneer that Ivy kind of projects of being, I got it all under control, and she keeps telling Harley throughout the series, listen, I don't want to team up. I'm a solo, and he's like, yeah, right, absolutely, man, funny as hell. I was looking up to try and find who wrote the pilot.
Well, I mean, as goes with every script, the entire writer's room contributes to everything. The pilot had Dean, Justin, and my names as, you know, shared credit for writing the pilot. You know, we wrote the first couple of drafts together, and then, you know, you give it to the writer's room, everybody weighs in, you sort of try and synthesize everybody's notes there, they add in jokes, everybody's punching up everybody else's scripts. So, I mean, honest to God, like every episode, you know, is written by everybody, but yeah, the pilots, Justin, myself, and Dean are credited as the writers of the pilot.
I understand, and as you said earlier too, great writers combination of people that know the DC universe well and great comedy writers. We had a great conversation as well recently about the second season, where you really kind of ticked off so many great new writers that you've got, and you know, stand-ups and a lot of women on the writing staff as well, which I think is really cool. Yeah, man. No, it's a great first episode, and I got to congratulate you guys. I mean, really, you know, you know, the way it wraps up and kind of sets up the rest of the series. Obviously, you know, there's another final stand where the Joker gives her that offer of coming back. All is forgiven in that classic kind of jerk boyfriend way.
Yeah.
And thankfully Harley sees the light and is like, no, I'm going to strike out on my own. And I guess her objective is to join the Legion of Doom on her own and not just be considered a sidekick. And that's kind of, you know, again, the dictate that takes us through the first season.
Yeah. I mean, the pilot is certainly, looking back now, it's kind of an anomaly in that, you know, it's a lot of setup. You know, we needed to get, that was always the charge, right? Like we needed to bring in new viewers, you know, who may not be as familiar as most of the subscribers are going to be for DC Universe subscribers. are going to be with the character. And so it was like straddling this line of like, how much do we retell? How, how much do we sort of give away of the Joker and Harley's past? And then also just tonally figuring out what that's going to be, and, sort of how dark do we get with it? Because even like, looking back in the days of like Mad Love and like Batman the Animated Series, like, that story there's some real dark stuff there. And I, the darkness was always kind of, it's an undercurrent in ours, but we really wanted to like focus on the comedy in the early days of the show as much as possible. And so we were like, well, we're not going to show, there's no like physical abuse. A lot of it is emotional, abandonment, gaslighting, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, we, as violent as the show is, it was always, sort of the violent and criminally insane, exacting violence on even worse people or people who are, of their equals and on the moral spectrum or lack of one. So, that was kind of our task with that opening. And so, we were always, we always kept telling people like, it gets funnier. The show gets funnier. Once we were able to like get all the pipe laid,
Well, I love too how you go back to that beautiful dance of the Joker and Harley, and I mean, it's one of my favorite Alex Ross images. Is them kind of this formal looking thing, and then also too that Harley starts off in the old fashioned Batman animated series Harlequin look, and
that
then
was
by
all.
the end, is in her Arkham City gaming phase that now is kind of the representation of today's Harley Quinn and stuff. But we see the transition in your pilot.
Yeah, that was always part of the pitch for the pilot episode, that she starts off in the Jester costume, and then it's a metamorphosis thing, right? And she literally sheds it, becomes her own person, physically, mentally, all that stuff. And so it just felt like that was such a an easy no-brainer to put into the pilot. So
excellent, Matt. Well, it sets the tone for the rest of the series. Season 2 or episode 2 season 2 is great. Obviously, episode 2 of season 1 might be my favorite episode, and we'll talk about that next time. But yes, Harley's mission now is to prove herself worthy of the Legion of Doom. We'll get into that on the next episode. And this was, of course, as you said, the first episode has a lot of setup, and I think that's why we spent so much time talking about things that you put in the first episode. Is there anything else we want to say about that before we wrap and do another session for season 2?
No, let's move into season 2
or episode 2, I guess. Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll wrap up now. And Patrick, thank you for your time, and we'll talk on our next episode about episode 2, which is pretty great and goes into a lot of crazy things, and more characters are introduced. And but thank you, and thanks for doing this, and we'll talk next time.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks again for watching another Word Balloon video. We've got plenty more at our channel, Word Balloon. If you enjoyed it, please like it and consider subscribing to the channel. And of course, support me on Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thanks a lot for watching.